Okay. Okay, let's get started. Yes, let's get started. So welcome to this conference on reforming Asian utilities, institutional reforms for boosting private investment, which is jointly organized by we at ADBI, also the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia area, and Economic Analysis and Policy Journal. As you can see from the screen before, this is being recorded so that we are by attending, accepting connection, or continuing participation in the event, participants thereby consent to the possible use of their name, likeness, voice, spoken or written comments, or papers, presentations in whatever form in all media publications, video sharing, websites, recordings, disseminations, or other external affairs purposes for the Institute without compensation or permission. And you can ask questions and during the Q&A sessions, either by raising your hand or writing the question in the chat box. Also, it's very nice to see lots of familiar faces. For those who don't know me, I'm Peter Morgan. I'm the Vice Chair of Research at the Asian Development Bank Institute. I would also note that we have a very tight schedule. So for the presentations, we have a time allocation of 15 minutes for the presentation, 10 minutes for the discussant, and 10 minutes for Q&A. So I would ask all the chairpersons to exercise a very tight time control, and you'll get a message in the chat box saying when 3 minutes are left for either the presenter or the discussant. There's a question from Mark Timothy Manaus. Can we unmute him? Well, perhaps. Anyway, let's get started. It's now a time. So first, let me invite our Dean Tetsushi Sonobe to give the opening remarks. So, Dean Sonobe, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yeah. So this is Sonobe, Dean of ADB Institute. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. It's a pleasure and honor to deliver an opening and welcoming remarks on behalf of ADB Institute, one of the organizers of this conference. First of all, I wish to express my thanks to the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia or area, and the Economic Analysis and Policy Journal for co-organizing this important event. I'm also grateful to keynote speakers, Dr. Peter Morgan of ADBI and Professor Clebo Wilson, editor of Economic Analysis and Policy Journal. All the presenters, discussants, and the session chairs, and all the participants. Thank you very much for attending the conference out of your busy schedule to contribute to making discussion even richer. I give my thanks also to the conference organizing team at ADBI. As you know, the background of this conference is as follows. While most utility services in developing world used to be supplied under monopolies, there has been growing recognition that in some subsectors, such as electricity generation and the long-distance calling services, competition is both feasible and desirable. Thus, many countries have undergone significant utility sector reforms, gradually lifting legal monopoly restrictions, allowing competition to emerge, and resulting in increased efficiency. The reform experiences of many developing countries, however, has revealed the complexities of introducing market-based reforms in utility industry. After more than a quarter of a century of the reform process, the power sector in Asia is facing challenges associated with decarbonization, security of supply, energy access, energy market efficiency, and sourcing adequate financing to meet the wide range of energy policy objectives in the region. Difficulty in accessing finance is one of the critical factors constraining the involvement of private sector in utility in Asia. This workshop and the related special journal issue aim to provide a compendium of lessons and policies to policymakers and the economic development practitioners in Asia, which will help them reform the utility industries to deliver their sector-specific objectives. These policies contribute to promoting economic development and the prosperity of the whole region. The workshop aims to answer the questions as to whether the existing institutional framework are fit for their purpose, how to reform Asian utilities to meet sector-specific objectives, how to make utilities attractive for private investors, and other important questions. I look forward to fruitful discussion during the workshop that provides useful reform lessons. With that, I conclude my opening and welcoming remarks. Thank you very much for your attention. Peter, over to you.
Thanks very much, Dean Sonobe. I should note that there was a late change in the program. Unfortunately, Cleva Wilson was not able to participate. So we will go directly to the explanation of the special journal issue by Professor Farhad Tagizadeh Hesari at Tokai University and Professor Arupindra Nepal, who's a senior lecturer in economics at the School of Accountancy, Economics and Finance at the University of Wollongong in Australia. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Peter, Dean Sonobe, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon from Japan. So first of all, I would like to express my thanks to ADBI and to AREA for co-organizing this event. So one of the outputs of this project is a special issue of the journal Economic Analysis and Policy that I'm going to briefly introducing this journal, and then Dr. Rabindra Nepal will talk more on the special issue specifically. So Economic Analysis and Policy is celebrating the 50th anniversary this year. And Elsevier publishes this journal, and in 2019, it had an impact factor of 1.96 and CITE score of 2.9. So the journal is indexed in Web of Science, SSCI, Social Science Citation Index, and also Scopus. So over the last 50 years, the journal has developed from being a journal focusing mainly on Australian issue to one with both international readership and authors. it has always strived to retain a clear focus on policy-related research. So EAP is prepared a 50th anniversary special issue that highlights a selection of 50 articles over 50 years and a brief overview of the journal's history. So the special issue is available now on the journal website. So EAP publishes articles from all economics branches with a particular focus on research, theoretical and applied. But the important thing that needs to be attention is the strong policy relevance that also need to be considered in this ongoing special issue. The journal also publishes survey articles and empirical replications on key policy issues, but the authors are expected to highlight the main insight in a non-technical introduction and in the conclusion. Based on the most recent revision in the aim and scope of the journal, articles may now be submitted under 4 categories: analysis of topical policy issues, modeling economic policy issues, survey articles, and economic research replications. These changes ensure the journal play an even stronger role as a quality international journal in applied economic analysis and policy. And Professor Clevo Wilson also apologized that he couldn't join this event, but he expressed his best wishes for the workshop participants entitled Reforming Asian Utilities, Institutional Reform for Boosting Private Investment and for Producing High Quality Papers for the Journal Special Issue. Thank you. Rabindra, please.
Rabindra?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I'd like to share the screen if I may.
I think you should be able to share your screen.
Yes, now I can do that.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much and welcome to this ADBI-ERIA hosted joint event on reforming Asian utilities, institutional reforms for boosting private investment. So first of all, I would very much like to thank ADBI and ERIA for making this happen. Special thanks goes to the Dean of Dr. Peter Morgan from ADBI and Dr. Anbu from ERIA area, right? So the guest editors for this special issue are Dr. Farhad, Dr. Peter Morgan, Dr. Anbu, and myself. So as Dr. Farhad already highlighted in his speech, that the journal is now 50 years old. It was established in 1970, and there is a special issue now celebrating its 50 years of lifespan. And I must tell you that one of the articles that special issue includes is also a backbone for this special issue, because that was one of my own articles and that provided a foundation towards this call for papers for this special issue. So I'm pleased to share that information with you all. And as Dr. Farhad already said, it's published by Elsevier, but this Economic Analysis and Policy is an official journal of the Economic Society of Australia, Queensland branch, okay? And it's also indexed in the Australian Business Deans Council as a B-ranked journal. So, and over the years, it has witnessed a large surge in international readership and authorship. And it's great that we, through this special issue, are partnering with this journal. And I hope this is beginning to many other possible partnerships to come. Okay, so now the next focus of this of my talk is around the content of the special issue itself. And as Dean Sonobe has already provided a brief overview, so the utilities sector underwent complete market-based reforms in the early 1990s, and it's now more than 3 decades of the reform process. What has worked, what has not worked, what was intended to achieve, has it been achieved? Now there are new drivers in place around decarbonization targets, security of supply objectives, affordability issues with growing energy poverty, for example, right? So what does the reform involve to achieve these complicated and complicated and related objectives, often characterized by trade-offs among themselves, right? So this special issue in particular aims to provide answers to this question by comprising different lessons from different utility sectors. And as such, this special issue is open to submissions around topics like utilities reform in Asian countries, financing and investment in utilities, utility structure, competition and regulation. And we certainly received quite a lot of high quality submissions. And we as guest editors are working on those submissions to make sure that we have a robust special issue to be published. And the timelines as for the current submission process and the review process suggest that we'll have this issue ready by mid 2021. And if I'm wrong, Dr. Farhad will correct me on that. So this is a realistic timeline, I'm assuming. So yeah, that's it. So once again, thank you so much for your contribution. And today we are very much looking forward to hearing from all the authors on their high quality work. So thank you very much, Dr. Peter Morgan.
Okay. Thank you, Farhad and Rabinda. We do have a few minutes, so maybe we can take one or two questions if anybody has a question on the special journal issue. Okay, well, if not, let's then proceed to session one, which is performance assessment and increasing efficiency in Asian utilities. The chair is Venkatachalam Ambumoji, or Ambu for short. He's the senior energy economist at AREA in Indonesia, and also a very old colleague of ours at ADBI. So Ambu, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Professor Sonabe and the Dean ADBI and area based basically in Jakarta, working for the 16 economies. It's a great pleasure to be a part in partnership with ADBI and the Journal of the Economic Analysis and the Policy Journal, and to have this meeting conference. And also it is my pleasure to work with Professor Mohan and Fargat and Nepal on this collaborative work. So welcome to this session one, and which is tackling about the performance assessment and the increasing efficiency of ASEAN utilities. When you think about and you imagine any Asian utility and power utility particularly, this is the image what we have. And the power utilities work with poor supervision and then insufficient capital, and they tend to be overstaffed, and which results in operational inefficiencies. So they don't have the proper cost recovery in tariff settings, and they also experience the financial losses. Even some utilities are hardly to cover their operating cost. This is a kind of image that is we had it in 70s and 80s. So these power utilities thought about it, and the countries has embarked into a sectoral reform that has an impact on the power utilities. So this power sector reforms ranges from introducing the regulations, the new regulations which are independent in nature, and then privatization of the parts of the power industries, particularly generating and the distribution, and also restructuring the utilities, downsizing it, and then making more digitalized now. And also they introduced the competition where there is a market-based actors fill in the gaps, or they replace the state-owned monopolies. So this is happening. It is these reforms are ongoing process. I think this session is going to capture and what are the ongoing reforms and how it affects or how it results in this improved performance of these utilities. So we do have two papers for this session, and the first paper is about the performance assessment of state-owned electricity distribution utilities in Asia. This is authored by Professor Gopal Sarangi of TERI. So I would like to invite Gopal Sarangi for 15 minutes presentation. So as I mentioned before, and let us keep a discipline here, so that is we have more time for interactive discussions. So Gopal Sarangi, Professor, you have 15 minutes presentation. It will be followed by a discussion for 10 minutes. Professor Sarangi, please.
Thank you, Professor Ambu Mochi, for a very nice introduction and giving a background of the conference and particularly for this session. At the outset, I'd like to thank Professor Sonove, Professor Peter Morgan, Professor Farad, and Professor Nepal for organizing this interesting conference and being part of the journal. So I hope that my PPT is visible. Is it visible to all of you? PPT is visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the title of this particular paper is Performance Assessment of State-Owned Electricity Distribution Utilities. And this paper is jointly developed by me, Professor Pradhan, and Professor Farad. This has been developed for the last 1 year, and we submitted the initial version to the journal. We received the feedback and working on the revised version. So the paper essentially is trying to look at whether distribution utilities are kind of performing efficiently, and if not, what could possibly be done. So as a background, let me tell you what is happening in the Indian context. If you look at Indian context, I think there has been a transformation in terms of the energy transition. And this transition is complex and quite cumbersome. And this transformation is primarily driven both by the domestic compulsions like your air pollution. 10 cities in India are in the topmost list globally as far as the air pollution is concerned. We are facing, I'm sitting in Delhi now and facing the problem. And global commitment like India's national determined contributions, where India is trying to get 40% of its energy from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. There are other challenges like energy access challenges, which are continuing, even though we have actually electrified almost 100% of all the households. But the problem is that how are you supplying the quality and reliable power supply to all the households? Second is also about energy security and all that. The transition question also in terms of the how we're actually penetrating the renewables. If you look at the recent data, most recent data, the total size is around 90 gigawatt of variable sources, various sources of renewables, which constitutes around 23% of the total installed capacity. And there are a whole lot of reforms and policy initiatives. Most recent ones are the amendment, the 2003 Act, Electricity Act, which is getting amended in 2020. And there has been a lot of force, particularly the focus is on to privatize the distribution utilities. Not only that, the distribution utilities are also the center of all these reforms and initiatives. You talk of energy efficiency, you talk of off-grid energy systems, you talk of rooftop. So distribution utilities are actually being put in the center in terms of these transitions. And if you look at but all these transitions and all that, whatever is happening is actually going through a lot of problems. And if I just narrow down the problems, centering it to distribution utilities, you see that distribution utilities are continuing to face the financial crisis. If you look at the most latest data, it says that 4.3 lakh crore debt by these distribution utilities. And it's imagine the kind of debt burden by the distribution utilities, which is actually hampering the growth of the Indian power sector. Not only that, regulatory assets, which are supposed to be, which are supposed to lead to increase in tariff, which has not happened, and it has touched a new high, which is like a huge amount of money, okay, 600,000 million. Aggregate technical and commercial losses are continuing to be very high. There has been rising cost of supply of distribution utilities. Distribution utilities are also facing problems in accommodating the rising share of renewables. And state ownership is continuing, even though this new amendment bill, which is coming up in 2020, is trying to move away from the state ownership and trying to get private entities entering into the distribution function, but still the state ownership continues to dominate in the, at least in the distribution segment, even though there has been some progress in the generation segment. This is a clear, this is clearly evident from this particular graph. If you can see this, that there has not been significant fall in terms of the aggregate technical and commercial losses, which are close to 27, 28% in 2008-9, and today it is almost close to 22%. So there has not been significant reduction in terms of this loss. So that means that the losses are continuing despite the fact that there has been a lot of investment, there have been a lot of reform initiatives undertaken by the government. Now, under this backdrop, this particular study is trying to understand what is the kind of efficiency that has been achieved by the distribution utilities. It's not that this particular study is very new. There have been a lot of studies, particularly starting from Tripta Thakur study in 2006, and then the most recent study by Bobde and Tanka, and one of those studies I think will be presented. Next one is by the Professor Jamsab. But I think that these studies are limited from different point of view. And one of the things is clearly coming that if you look at the efficiency analysis of distribution utilities, there are only a handful of studies compared to the studies that have been done in the generation segment. Second is that some of the studies have looked at micro level issues. For instance, Jadhav and Jadhav et al. Studies are looking at the efficiency of distribution divisions in a particular state, Uttarakhand. Similarly, some studies like Thakur et al. Study is trying to look at integrated utilities. Third is that this particular study stands ahead because most of these studies are using very old data, which is very, very important. Because if you look at Bobde and the other study, Bobde and Tanka study and Professor Jamsab study, which will be presented next, they're using data only up to 2012. And if you're using very old data, it doesn't have a lot of policy significance. But this particular study will be using, or is using, a very latest data which is available, 2018 and 2019 data. That is a major contribution of this particular study. Now, given this, so this study has very simple objective, very powerful objectives, two sets of objectives. It is actually using a two-stage analysis. One is that in one stage, it is using the data envelopment analysis to find out the efficiency, and then trying to understand whether these efficiency scores are contributing to the profitability of these distribution utilities. And as I said, that there are two-stage analysis of this particular study. In the first stage, we are using data envelopment analysis, and we're finding out the efficiency scores. In the second stage, we are using a simple regression using the derived efficiency scores to see whether efficiency scores are contributing to the profitability of firms or not. This is actually a revised version of the study, which was submitted to the journal. Now, as you know that most of you may be knowing that DEA is a non-parametric multi-factor productivity measure, which doesn't require you to spell out the functional form, doesn't require to assign the weights on a priori basis. And this particular study is using a very simple DEA model, but very powerful. It's basically using the basic model, constant return to scale, and input-oriented data and DEA model, which has been propounded by the Chance, Cooper, Rhodes. And the rationale behind this model is that most of the utilities are actually misutilizing or underutilizing the inputs. So hence, input-oriented model will be helpful to find out what extent you can actually reduce the inputs that have been used. Now, if you are putting the model more formally, so you have M inputs, S outputs, or you are using N observations, the model looks like this. You are actually trying to minimize the theta, which is actually the DMU, and using this model, you can actually find out the efficiency scores for each of the DMUs that are under consideration. We have applied this model to 48 DMUs, distribution utilities. once you get the efficiency scores, then these efficiency scores are used along with other variables to find out whether these efficiency scores are contributing to the profitability of the farm. So for that, we are using a regression OLS regression estimation, and where your dependent variable is basically the profit and loss of the farm, and independent variables are essentially the aggregate technical and commercial losses and agricultural consumption as percentage of total consumption, and then the efficiency scores. And I say that we are using the data, the most latest data which is available, which is 2018 and 2019, which actually stands much ahead of the other papers which have been there in the field. To our knowledge, the latest two papers, Bobde and Tanka and Jamsa Betal papers are using only 2012 data. Now, for DE analysis, we have taken two inputs. One is the employee cost, which is very important as far as the input is concerned. Second, other costs, which are actually non-employee costs. And output is a single output model, which is energy sold. And using this, we have come up with this DE scores, efficiency scores. And we found that 5 out of 48 utilities that have been taken into consideration, 5 of them are actually operating efficiently. And almost like 43 utilities are not operating efficiently. That means there have been a lot of scope to improve the efficiency of other 43 utilities. And if you gather or collect the data on the basis of states, you see that there has been an interesting trend coming up. Most of the larger states in India, like Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, all of them are not doing well. Whereas if you look at small states and even the hilly states like Tripura, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, they are doing much better compared to other largest states. This has strong policy implications in terms of the fact that you need to probably look at the efficiency of the farms and try to see what extent you can reduce the employee and non-employee cost. And as I said that there exists a lot of theoretical possibility of cost savings, both in terms of the employee cost as well as non-employee cost. And you see that whereas employee cost, the reduction size could be less, but non-employee cost, which essentially consists of your interest cost, A&G cost, O&M cost, all these costs, there has been a significant potential that actually can be used to reduce the non-employee costs. And as I said that larger states like Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Punjab, Tamil Nadu have a huge potential to reduce the cost. So there must be, these states must take action to reduce this cost. And then from regression analysis, they said that even though the R-square values are not very significant, but the signs of the coefficients are actually something which we need to discuss more. Particularly if you look at the signs of independent variables, AT and C, aggregate technical and commercial losses sign coming out to be negative, which is significant because that essentially tells you that if you are reducing the loss, it leads to increase in profit, which is actually a very expected sign as per the expectations. Similarly, agricultural consumption, everybody knows in Indian context, whatever is not counted is actually put at, under the head of agricultural consumption. So it's clearly coming out from the study that agricultural consumption, the sign of the coefficient for agricultural consumption is negative. That essentially means that if you are actually reducing the consumption, that will lead to increase in profit, which is very clearly in line with the current discussion that is happening. Third important element is the technical efficiency scores, and the sign is positive and it is coming out to be significant variable. That means that efficiency is really contributing. If you really improve the efficiency of these farms, it can really contribute to the enhancing of the profitability. This is a significant policy implication which is coming out from this. So this is a very brief presentation I wanted to deliver today. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'll be happy to discuss if there are comments or questions on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Gopal Sarangi from TERI School of Advanced Studies. This paper will be commented by Professor Mohammad Mohsin from the School of Finance and Economics, Jiangsu University in PRC. Professor Mohsin, please. Professor Mohsin, are you there?
I don't see him on the list of panelists here.
Oh. Okay, I think then if that is the case, and maybe we can go to the next paper, or we will have entertain some of the questions to immediately to Professor Sarangi. Is there any questions, comments, or suggestions for Professor Sarangi's paper?
Maybe can I start? I have a question.
Please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting paper, no doubt, with a huge policy implication, or policy implications, I must rather say. So, but the major thrust of this paper seems to be around using latest data, but the technique still is pretty much old, right? And I didn't see any, I mean, robustness tests around it. I mean, some criticisms have been made about the past papers, such as the one by Jamas 2018, citing that that paper uses old data, but and this paper is a step ahead to that because it relies on new data. But I think Jamas 2018 using old data is not a problem for the research question they are answering, because they are tracing the institutional change, and which has not changed much, you know, within these two different time periods. So I'm not so sure, you know, how further the importance of this paper can be articulated. So maybe Dr. Sarangi can highlight more on that.
Yeah, Professor Sarangi, and the question here is about the economic rigorousness as well as the methodology that you used. Could you please explain why you choose this multi-factor productivity measure of DEA, and what is the comment on the rigorousness and how the CCR model and the application of this model in the Indian context? Do you have any other better methodology considered before applying this one?
Thank you, Professor Ambumochi, and thank you, Professor Nepal, for highlighting this. Yeah, I'm not saying that. Yeah, definitely, Professor Jamsab is using a very different method. He is using stochastic frontier analysis. But my only question is that this is actually, as I said, this method, even though this has been used widely, but in Indian context, there are only few handful of papers, first of all, using particularly in the field of distribution segment. And if you look at, let's say, looking at Tripta Thakur's paper, which is actually pretty old now, and which is primarily looking at the efficiency of distribution, not distribution utilities, rather integrated utilities, like combining transmission, generation, and distribution utilities. And similarly, two other papers by Yadav et al., which are published in Energy and other journal. I think they are also looking at micro level units, like looking at only one state. There are only, I think, few handful of papers, like one by Meher and Sen. The other one is actually by Professor, I think, Bobde and Tanka. They are using the model, and this particular model, even though, yeah, this is a very simple model, I just said that this is a very powerful model to look at how the efficiency is actually playing out in terms of that, what would be the level of efficiency, that by using the latest data. So yeah, the model is definitely old, but in the application of Indian context is quite, I mean, relevant in the present context. So I'm not questioning the relevance of Professor Jamsab's paper. Definitely it is using a very different approach. The only thing that I'm trying to emphasize that this is new data, and Professor Jamsab's paper is definitely relevant as far as he's trying to look at a very different aspect of the institutional analysis, which is definitely giving a very different direction to the entire issue of institutions and regulation in the context of Indian power sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I think Professor Fargad is also co-author. Professor Fargad, do you like to add anything on the adaptation of this methodology in the Indian context?
Sorry. So thank you very much. So is there a question that I should answer?
Yeah, this is, yes, as a co-author, do you like to add anything in addition to what Professor Sarangi mentioned?
So if there is any comment or question, I would be happy.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Ambu, I see that Mohammed Mohsin is in the conference now.
Okay.
Maybe you can invite him to make his comments.
Professor Mohsin, can you hear us?
Yeah, I do. Oh, sorry. Is that
Yeah.
me or?
Sorry, I think we were missing you for this session, and Professor Sarangi has presented his paper and he explained the methodology and the results that is focusing on the performance assessment of the state-owned electricity utilities in India. And I think you have an opportunity to read this paper, and could you please share your comments with us?
So his mic is not connected, so.
Okay. Okay, while Professor Mohsin, can you hear us?
This is his comments, so we can see in the display
Okay.
screen.
I cannot read it, and
So yeah.
but it could be transmitted to Professor Sarangi later.
Yeah, yeah.
But given the time, I think still Mohsin has some time to come back. I have one question, Professor Sarangi, and your objective is measuring the institutional performance. Please correct me, I'm wrong, and efficiency of the electric distribution utilities and the profitability. But the narrative for this increasing the institutional efficiency in the Indian context comes like this. One is India need to achieve this universal access to the electricity. Second thing is this generation, the distribution utilities has to absorb more generation capacity that is coming from the independent power producers. Third one is it has to be competitive, and this state-owned electricities are losing their power in controlling the price. But the another dimension is the reality of subsidies, like as you mentioned about the Tamil Nadu, which is heavily subsidized for the agriculture electricity provisions. So how do you institutionalize this your model has the capacity and capability to incorporate all these dimensions, the narratives for the institutional efficiency and as well as the existence of subsidies that may decrease the profitability of the utilities companies.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ambu Mochi. I think this is a very valid question, and probably the next model or next study could try to accommodate that. But if you look at actually the current developments in the Indian context, so there has been a change recently happening as far as the subsidies are concerned. Let me give this example of rooftop energy, rooftop solar. I mean, now the fact is that subsidies are not directly given to the households, those who are installing the rooftops. Rather, I think the key actor in the rooftop process is now the distribution entities. So subsidies would be channelized through distribution entities. Now, if you're actually looking at efficiency, which actually indirectly captures to some extent, what extent these entities are efficient, that can help them to reduce the subsidies. Because if these entities are efficient, definitely they will play an important role in reducing the subsidies indirectly, no, not the direct way. So this is one. Second, I just said that yes, true, you are right. There has been a lot of subsidy commitment by the state or subnational entities, but when it comes to delivering the subsidies, state governments do not do that. Now that could probably be factored in the regression analysis. Somebody can actually include either the differences between the subsidies committed and subsidies delivered. They call it booked and received, subsidies booked and subsidies received as one of the variables, and to see whether subsidies actually is contributing to the profitability or not. That could probably be accommodated in the regression analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sarangi. And is there any other questions? comments, suggestions?
Ambu, it looks like there's a
Mohammed
question
Mohsin,
from
do you have
Ab-
anything
Abin-
to add? You are now here. We can see you and we can hear you.
Yes. If you unmute your mic,
Oh.
your mic is mute. Please unmute it.
Yeah, I've unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Hi, this is Abhinav Jindal. I am a PhD scholar in economics, and I'm also working with NTPC Limited. So it's the leading power generators in the world. So my question to Dr. Sarangi is regarding the choice of inputs for his study. So as I see, these choice of inputs are twofold. One is the inputs which relate to the employee costs, and the other are non-employee costs. So why has that categorization been made, and what all has been added to non-employee costs? So, and because we are talking about input oriented technical efficiency in case of distribution utilities. So I had a feeling that probably a larger number of inputs would have added some more light to the study. So what is the view of Dr. Sarangi on that?
Professor Sarangi.
Thank you so much again for this comment. I think it's a very relevant comment. Let me answer it in a very narrow and very in a very precise way. One is that definitely you're right that you could have actually included more inputs. The fact is that there has been data constraint. Okay, if you're using a latest data, which is very constant in terms of availability of data, which is actually fact in Indian context. This is one. That is why we included only 2 inputs. Second is that when you look at why have we categorized inputs into employee cost and non-employee cost, because if you're looking at non-employee cost, and if you look at all the reforms and the restructuring that has been happening currently, particularly look at the Udaya scheme, you may be knowing that. Look at why privatization is happening. And it's one of the reasons is that they want to reduce the interest costs. So interest cost actually is a major significant chunk of cost as far as the non-employee cost is concerned. So the whole focus is to reduce that employee cost, and which is coming out clearly in our paper that if you're looking at the cost reduction possibility, and if you look at the non-employee cost reduction possibility, there is a huge potential. So that clearly is matching us in sync with the kind of reform initiative or discussion that is going on, and this has clear policy implications. So that is why the primary reason is that your non-employee cost constitutes A&G costs, O&M costs, interest costs, and other associated costs, which are quite relevant as far as the functioning or efficiency of the distribution utilities are concerned. So it is quite relevant to take these 2 inputs and find out whether distribution utilities are operating efficiently or not. And I think it has a lot of policy significance. Definitely, you will try to improve or try to see if we can include few other variables. But as I said that we are doing a 2-stage analysis. And the first stage, we are trying to look at the efficiency. In the second stage, we are actually using the efficiency scores to see whether profitability is actually getting influenced by this efficiency of distribution utilities. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mohsen, so your mic is working now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think it's okay.
Please.
Yeah, please go ahead with your comments.
Okay, thank you so much. So can you see my screen?
No. We can see only the ADBI logo, and I think you have some written comments. Could you please share it with us?
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
share the screen again.
Let me share the screen. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, please. Now we can see it is a Word document.
Okay, thank you so much. So it's very important. The title is very important and it can attract the reader attention. So my question is regarding inputs and output selection. So employee cost and non-employee cost has been used as inputs. and then energy sold has been used as outputs. So I think authors should use the slack-based DEA model. The reason is that in the slack-based DEA model, the objective function, in the slack-based DEA objective function, the slacks, it means the misutilization of resources should be minimum, one. The second point is that I think there should be two types of outputs. One is the desirable, second is the undesirable. Normally, nowadays, in our energy, economics, and environmental concern, we are using GDP, and output can be used as a desirable output, and CO2 emission can be used as an undesirable output, same like that. So by using the same pattern of research, the authors can use two types of outputs. So one is a desirable, second is the undesirable. In the undesirable, they can use distribution and transmission losses and the power theft. So especially in my country, Pakistan, we have 22% power theft. And more than 20% is the distribution and transmission losses due to the old system of electricity, old system infrastructure. So that's why I suggest there should be two types of outputs, desirable and undesirable. Secondly, the author should clearly mention that they are using the parametric and non-parametric DEA techniques. So definitely in the objective function of DEA, data development analysis, we want to maximize our efficiency. But if we have undesirable output, so how we can deal with the efficiency? So I mean, if they can use undesirable output, then still they want to maximize the efficiency score or minimize the efficiency score. So technically, they should be clarified. And then authors are good that increasing the share of agricultural consumption can negatively impact the profit of utilities. So how about the split analysis? So I mean, if the agriculture sector is consuming, so definitely they are contributing in the revenue, which can be incorporated in the profit. So I think this should be addressed. And then the important point, the OLS regression analysis carried out to test whether the efficiency score do influence the profitability of such utility. So I think the major concern should be relative inputs and outputs. For example, so authors can use efficiency score as a dependent variable, and number of inputs and outputs can be used as an independent variable. So I have suggestion regarding independent and dependent variable in the OLS regression. Okay, the most important thing, in the above model, in the first stage, DEA model, we are using some certain inputs and certain outputs. And then we are measuring the efficiency. Output divided by inputs is equal to efficiency. So same like that, the DEA model, the same variable, the same pattern of variable should be used in the OLS model. So in the OLS model, in the OLS model, the efficiency score can be used as a dependent variable. Number of inputs and number of outputs can be categorized as an independent variable in the OLS regression. And then in the methodology section, the authors claim that the important contribution of this study is the methodological approach of the two-stage analysis. So, which is additional novelty of this paper. So how? I think, so do you mean the application of DEA and regression can be considered as a two-stage analysis? Either it's or it's not. If they are considering DEA and regression in the two-stage analysis, so how about the number of variables? So for example, if I'm not wrong, I think it's a little bit confusing for me. So they are using two-stage analysis. In the above DEA model, they are using different variables. And in the regression analysis, they are using somewhat different analysis. This is a little bit confusing for me if I'm not wrong. And then finally, I would suggest a robust analysis by regressing the important output variable by taking the efficiency score as the inputs and outputs. For example, efficiency score can be used as a dependent, while input and output can be used as an independent variable. So that's what I have some questions regarding that paper.
Thank you, Professor Moshin, for this comprehensive and constructive suggestions as well as the inquiries. Professor Sarangi, you would like to react to these 5 points?
Thank you, Professor Mohsin, for coming up with very good suggestions. But I think the model itself is completely different what you are actually conceiving. Even though the model is very simple, but it is actually the two-stage analysis essentially is trying to look at what is the efficiency of these distribution utilities, and then using in the next stage, using the efficiency scores and running the regression with other variables to test whether the efficiency of distribution utilities are contributing to the profitability of the farms. I think, and this has been, this has been used in other countries' context, in other sectoral context. For instance, one of our earlier papers which published in Water Policy, where we have used this two-stage analysis to find out the efficiency of the urban water utilities. I, along with Professor in Delhi School of Economics, published the paper in Water Policy in 2012. I think, so similar studies are also can be found in other countries' context. As I said, the novelty, it's not new that we are using first time the two-stage analysis, but this has been used in other countries' context, in other sectors' context. But the novelty primarily lies in that the two-stage analysis, particularly in the context of electricity distribution utilities in Indian setting, is new. That is what actually the novelty is. And second, as I said, that it's also with just the latest data, which is directly, and which is, the data is just published few months before. And the paper which is presenting is the revised version of the paper, which will be submitted again to the EAP journal. So I think it has a lot of policy implications in the sense that it uses a lot of data, and currently there has been a lot of discussion going on at the Indian policy level to find out the efficiency and look at how the distribution utilities can be privatized. So I think this has significant policy implications in terms of the fact that if you get the right numbers and using, even if you're using simple model, simple econometrics model and simple non-parametric model, I think that will help. And as far as the non-parametric and parametric model is concerned, as I said, that DEA itself is a non-parametric model, as it is not going to spell out the functional forms between the inputs and outputs. It's simply trying to find out the efficiency without looking at the errors. Whereas in case of a regression, which is used in the second stage analysis, is definitely a parametric model. And we said that it's a very simple regression. We're not looking at the R-square data. The R-square is R-square value, which is coming out to very low. But the powerful implications are in terms of the signs of the coefficients of the independent variables, and also the value of coefficient of particularly as far as the efficiency scores are concerned. I think, yeah, otherwise we will see definitely what extent we can take your comments into consideration and improve the paper again and submit it to EAP. And we have already received some good guidance from the Professor Farah, the Professor Nepal, Professor Anbumochi, and thanks to Professor Peter Morgan. All these, thanks a lot again, everybody, for contributing to enhancing and improving this paper.
Thank you, Professor Sarangi, and thank you, Professor Moshin. And now we have 1 more minute to left. And is there any other additional questions, inquiries, suggestions? If not, let us thank Professor Gopal and Professor Moshin, as well as the other contributors, to make this discussions lively on the paper authored by Professor Sarangi and his colleagues. Thank you very much, Professor Sarangi. Let us move to the next paper, and this is the by Manuel Lorca, and he's from the Copenhagen School of Energy Infrastructure. The title of the paper is "The Effect of Institution on the Performance of Regulated Firms in Developing Countries." Again, these evidences are coming from India. Professor Manuel Lorca, please. You have 15 minutes for presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, because I have some technical problems with the camera and the microphone, so if there is any issue at any moment, please stop me. Well, many thanks. Well, first, shall I share my screen? Do you have the
Yes, you
slides?
should. Yeah.
Perfect.
I think still Muhsin's paper is online. How to move it?
Oh, it's okay if
Okay. Now we can. You are.
Can you see my?
Yes. Yes, please.
Perfect. Yeah. I put it full screen. It is. Okay. Good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manuel Yorca from Copenhagen School of Energy Infrastructure in Denmark, and I'm going to present this paper, which has been written also with Professor Turatia Mas from the same institution as me, and also with Dr. Pavan Katrapal from Nirma University in India, and Tripta Thakur from Manit Bhopal, also in India. In this paper, we try to analyze the performance of the electricity distribution sector in India, putting the emphasis on institutional endowment and how this affect the cost efficiency of electricity distribution utilities located in different states of the country. Well, I will try to be brief in this part because this has been well covered in the previous presentation. But I would like to say a few things. Since the 1990s, India has implemented a number of reform steps to improve the efficiency of its. Sorry? Oh, I thought someone was talking. Okay.
No, please proceed.
Okay. India has implemented, as I was saying, a number of reform steps to improve the efficiency of its electricity sector. And there have been several electricity acts, amendments, and downstream policies that have led to some important changes during the last 2 decades. However, despite these reforms, the electricity sector in India still faces some important issues that remain to be solved, and we have heard before, as I said. For instance, there are 789 million people in the world without access to electricity, and India hosts around 100 million of them. In addition, similarly to other developing countries, corruption remains a pressing issue that can be directly related to the lack of transparency and poor institutional endowment. In particular, institutions, markets, and infrastructure affect the electricity industry, where poor performance is a cause of poor economic development and a bottleneck to social equity. So in summary, and not just for the case of India, but also for other developing countries, barriers to improvement and expanding access to electricity are capacity and technical, economic and financial, and policy, political and institutional. In this table here, we can have a look at some relevant features of the Indian electricity sector and compare them with selected countries and world's average to put India's numbers in an overall context. Despite being the second largest country in the world in terms of population, we can see that its generation capacity is much lower than in China, for instance, or USA, and only around the double or less than the double in Brazil or Russia. Moreover, the per capita consumption levels are well below the rest of the countries in the table and world average. If we look at the energy intensity, we can observe that the country does not use much energy to yield its GDP, which may be indicating an intensive use of labor in production processes. In India, a major issue that we have heard before is our large energy losses in the electricity distribution sector, much larger than in other countries on the world average. You can also see that electricity rates are in all the countries are around 100%. However, this may be to the fact that electricity access sometimes is measuring using the number of electrified villages. And a village is considered electrified when at least 10% of the buildings are connected to the grid. So despite lagging behind in some indicators and all the challenges ahead, there have been good improvements in India, like the massive reduction in access to electricity of about 700 million in the last 20 years. We can also see in the last row here in this table that the Indian economy is growing faster than most countries. To understand the importance of the electricity distribution sector, we can start by saying that market-oriented reform of network industries began in many countries around the world in the 1990s. And the key step reform has been the unbundling of the sector in 4 segments: generation, transmission, distribution, and retailing, where in general, 2 of them, transmission and distribution, have remained regulated. Moreover, the importance of the regulation of network has been frequently highlighted because of their impact on the competitive segments and ultimately on social welfare. In the case of India, despite the reforms in the form of corporatization and unbundling, the distribution sector is having large financial losses, inefficiency, low productivity, and frequently interruptions. So finally, there is evidence that institutional quality has a significant influence on the economic development of countries. However, despite the critical importance, there is little knowledge and empirical evidence of the effect of institutions at countries' sectoral and regional level. And that's one of the main motivations for this paper. And particularly to study the case of India, which is a good example for this kind of analysis. For instance, here we can just to have a brief idea of the different differences between Indian states and all the heterogeneity. We can see the comparison of the population in the different states of India with the population of other countries in the world. So we can see, for instance, that and forgive me if I make some mistakes locating the states or saying the names of the states, but we can see here that Uttar Pradesh is India's most populous state with about 200 million people, which is about the size of Brazil. Maharashtra has 120 million, which is about the size of Mexico. Bihar, it's about the size of Philippines. Goa, for instance, less than 2 million on the other side, less than 2 million, which is the size of Guinea-Bissau. And Nagaland, around 2 million, which would be the size of Latvia. However, if we look at the size of the states in economic terms, we can see, for instance, that the economy of Uttar Pradesh is the size of a country like Qatar, a small country with less than 3 million people. So this results in Uttar Pradesh having a low per capita GDP, and it's at the level of a country like Kenya in Africa. On the opposite case, we have, for example, Goa, whose per capita GDP is one of the largest in India, and it is at the same level as Ukraine. So putting together this figure and the previous one, we can glimpse the enormous heterogeneity existing within India, which makes this country, as I said, the perfect example to analyze differences in institutional quality at regional or state level in this case, and analyze whether these affect the performance of a regulated sector, such as electricity distribution. If we look now at briefly at the methodology, in this paper, we utilize a stochastic frontier analysis approach to estimate a set of cost functions. Stochastic frontier analysis is a parametric approach quite commonly used in the efficiency and productivity analysis literature that sometimes has been used by regulators as a benchmarking method to evaluate utilities performance. Similarly to data development analysis, as we have seen in the previous presentation, the application of this approach can be used to identify best performers and measuring the relative efficiency of the utilities in the sector. Here we estimate both homoscedastic and heteroscedastic models, because the application of heteroscedastic models allows us to identify factors that affect the cost efficiency of electricity distribution network operators. We include several state-level variables as inefficiency determinants. We include GDP and GDP growth, and we additionally include a set of variables related to institutional, political, and infrastructure quality. We include a Human Development Index, also the number of the times the president's rule was imposed, also the number of times the chief minister headed the coalition government, which should reflect the political environment and stability of the state, a ratio of surface road length to total road length, which has to do with the condition of the state as provider of infrastructure and necessary goods and services. We also include the state public expenditure as percentage of state GDP, which should reflect the extent of the intervention of the state government in the economy. And finally, we also introduced the share of the secondary sector in the state GDP as a control variable for the level of industrialization of the state. These are the three models that we are we are estimating three cost functions. We use two specifications, Cobb-Douglas and Translog, which are quite common in the literature. And in our last model, in our last cost function, we include inefficiency determinants as well. We can see here the model proposed by Egnell, Lovell, and Smith in 1977, which is the first one that was proposed, in which in our context, we would have a cost function in which we introduce outputs, input prices, other control variables and parameters to be estimated in the frontier. And then we will have random term, which is composed of V and U. V is the traditional noise term, and U is the inefficiency term. In the model below are a CFG proposed by several authors. Basically is similar to the Egnell, Lovell, and Smith model, but in this one, it's possible to introduce some inefficiency determinants, which are represented by Z in the equation below, and these affect the variance of the inefficiency term in our model. Well, the data, our data set includes 52 electricity distribution companies from 24 different states for the period 2007-2007 to 2011-2012. It's a balanced panel data set with 312 observations, and the data comes from different company annual reports and international sources and different types of publications. If we move now to the parameter estimates, here we have the three models. First, well, we have the Cobb-Douglas and the Translog without inefficiency determinants, and in the last columns, a Translog with inefficiency determinants, which is our preferred model based on the application of a chi-square likelihood ratio test. So the dependent variable in the three models is total costs, and for the Translog specifications, well, we only present the first order coefficients due to space constraints in the slide. If we focus on our preferred model, we can observe that all the first order coefficients in the frontier are statistically significant and present the expected sign. So the coefficients for the outputs, energy sold, number of customers, network energy losses, and distribution capacity, and also the input prices, labor price and capital price, are positive. The coefficients of these variables are positive as expected. We also include a time trend that shows a negative coefficient, which indicates technical change. And additionally, we include a dummy of private ownership that shows a positive coefficient, indicating that private firms exhibit a higher total cost. Regarding the variables in the inefficiency term, we include average technical and commercial losses, which shows a negative coefficient, and that means that this variable has a negative effect on firms' inefficiency. Considering that the coefficient of energy losses in the frontier, in the upper part of the table, is positive, we can say that there is an ambiguous relationship between energy losses and firms' costs that we'll explore later on in my presentation. GDP shows a negative effect on inefficiency, while the GDP growth increases in inefficiency, which may be related to the existence of adjustment costs. The coefficient for Human Development Index is negative, which may reflect a positive influence of the quality of the manpower on firms' performance. And regarding the variables related to the quality of institutions, we find that except President's rule, all of them are significant. The coefficient for the dummy of having a coalition government is positive, indicating that government instability and delays in decision making negatively affects utilities performance. The coefficient for the ratio of surface road is positive, which may evidence either a trade-off between the spending of transport and electricity, or a crowding out effect due to state public investment resulting in a poor management of the utilities. The variable exp shows a negative coefficient, suggesting that higher public expenditure has a positive effect on the performance of the utilities. And finally, the coefficient for the share of secondary sector is negative, indicating that higher level of industrialization in the state implies lower inefficiencies in the sector. We can obtain the average efficiency for the whole sample, which is 69.3%, which is similar value to the one found by Thakur et al. In 2006, but they were using a different sample and using a different approach. It can be observed that the three estimated model presents similar patterns, but different levels of efficiency. In general, we see a decline in the performance of the utilities with a small recovery after 2009-2010. And finally, if we look at the marginal costs of energy losses, when we only consider the estimated coefficient from the frontier in the upper graph, we observe a positive relationship between energy losses and the marginal cost. The average marginal cost in this case is positive, around 6 lakh rupees per million unit. However, when we look at the marginal cost of energy losses, considering the estimated coefficients both in the frontier and in the inefficiency term, in the bottom figure, the average marginal cost becomes negative, reaching around -5 lakh rupees per million unit. This shows that utilities can reduce costs by limiting their efforts to reduce energy losses. So this makes sense when low prices make loss reduction.
Dr. Manuel, could you please wrap up? And
yes, it's just a final comment in this graph, and then it's the conclusion slide. So yes, I was just saying that this makes sense when low prices makes loss reduction activities uneconomic, or when the cost of losses is passed on to consumers. And finally, the figure in the right-hand side shows that the evolution of network energy losses and average technical and commercial losses over time. So we can observe that the average technical and commercial losses have declined over time, which might be one of the reasons behind the fall of the average efficiency over time that we have seen in the previous slide. However, we can see that the magnitude of energy losses has increased over time during the sample period. So this indicates that the electricity in the system has grown at a higher pace than the reduction in the average technical and commercial losses. Well, this is the conclusion slide, but I've mentioned just all the things. So just to wrap up, I can say that in summary, the results of our paper show that economic incentives alone may not be sufficient for improving the efficiency of regulated firms, and institutions can constrain the capacity of firms to achieve their potential. So for those reasons, measures to improve the quality of institutions, and in particular in the regulatory agencies, should be priority objectives in order to reap long-term rewards. And I think that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Manuel Lorca, and it is a very good presentation, and having a concrete results, though it is a disappointing. Let it be discussed by Professor Suk Shim. She is from the Lucia J. Sapan School of Business in Staten Island. Professor Shim, please.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, great. What about my screen? Can you guys
very
see
clear.
my screen? Good, good. All right, so it's great to be your discussant. I mean, I really enjoy to read this paper, and particularly the topic and the research question is pretty interesting, and I think it's meaningful because of the importance of institution. I mean, ever since they're on ADBI-Moglu, actually, I learned from my Turkish friend how to pronounce Deron Acemoglu's name, and because he's a Turkish. Well, anyway, it's a long one. So Acemoglu, Robinson's, and Johnson's work on the causal relationship between institution and the economic growth. In institution is known to be one of the important factor to stimulate economic growth and etc. And electricity industry is one of the major infrastructure establishment I would think to initiate the economic growth for the developing countries. So this paper will be very, very meaningful on that. Okay, so I am applied microeconometrician, so my comment mostly on the identifications and stuff. So I took a look at their model, the empirical econometric model, which is a cost function, and cost function is a function of production function plus some error terms, and to be honest, I never seen this kind of specification, but it looks like a stochastic diffusion model from time series analysis. And I think it's pretty interesting to see, to impose this kind of, diffusion term and estimating the cost inefficiency term through this model specification. But since this cost function include or it has the main factor, production function as a main factor, it would have the same identification issue or endogeneity issue same identification issue and the endogeneity issue as like regular general productivity production function estimations. So the major thing, main issue these days in production function estimation is how to control the endogenous unobserved price. And what happened here is that, I mean, obviously electricity distribution companies are pretty monopolized because of scales of economy. So I think, it most likely exercise a monopoly pricing. But since I'm sure Indian the electricity distribution companies are highly likely to be state-owned. I'm sorry about my lack of background knowledge. I don't know. I'm not sure whether Indian electricity distribution companies are completely state-owned or not. But the point is, if that company, Indian electricity distribution company, exercise monopoly pricing, so production function estimate, your production function estimation will capture at this slope. And if the Indian electricity distribution companies are exercising competitive pricing because they are state-owned, that production function estimation, the coefficient of the production function estimate here, the marginal productivity, will be up here. Okay, so what I want to emphasize in this graph is that if there's no control for endogenous pricing behavior or endogenous price, which is unobservable, then your estimation, your production estimation, might not be identifiable and statistically inconsistent. Okay. So here's my suggestion. I don't think this the author would need additional data collection and running another regression with instrumental variables and stuff. Instead, I would suggest to discuss about public sector pricing, where how the Indian electricity distribution companies have exercised the prices. I mean, electricity distribution prices. Right? I took I took some sentences from this paper, Boss, in 1985, from Handbook of Public Economics, and he summarizes 3 major public sector pricing schemes. First one is marginal cost pricing, and second, this is just a charge marginal cost, which is ideal situation where there will be absolutely no endogenous price, unobserved price in the error term, because they just charge a marginal cost. Okay. But second one is Ramsey pricing. This is the least ideal pricing scheme, where the electricity distribution company will charge exactly the demand, exactly how much the demand of the electricity distribution from the consumers. Okay, and the third one, which is our ROI, return of investment. Rate of investment return, constant, fixed, or fixed pricing. This is another ideal pricing scheme where the price of the service, electricity distribution service, will be pretty much fixed and deterministic or exogenous, so that there will be no endogenous price endogeneity due to unobserved price correlation between unobserved price and the production factors. Okay. All right, so that is pretty much my suggestion, and I'm pretty sure. Sorry, I should say sure, because I never heard about how the Indian electricity distribution companies charge their service fees, but most likely the state-owned enterprises exercise ROI fixed pricing, because they might need to compensate their investors and the shareholders, if they have, on top of their marginal cost. So I would just suggest to have have a little section or a couple of paragraphs discuss about how the Indian electricity distribution companies charge a service fee, and what would be the closest price scheme in public economics. I mean, of the public companies in public economics context, and demonstrate, hey, we don't, in this, our sample or our target objective have no concern on unobserved price, endogeneity due to unobserved prices. Yeah, that is it. And please take my screen. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Kyung-Suk Shim. Your comments are suggestive and also constructive. Before opening the floor for the question and answer, can we get a reaction from Dr. Manuel about the comments by Shuksham? It is very technical and methodological also.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yes. Many thanks, Hyun, for your very positive and constructed feedback. I really appreciate your words, and I think they are really meaningful. So just a couple of reactions or comments about the things you mentioned. So regarding if the utility and distribution utilities in India are mainly publicly owned or private. You were right. Most of them are public, and there are just a few examples of private utilities. And for that reason, we have include that dummy of private companies in our sample. What we are estimating here is the cost function, and not production function. So we, as the theory suggests, for when estimating cost functions, we're including output, input prices, and then, well, we include other factors. And then the application of the stochastic frontier frontier analysis approach is quite standard and quite common from the end of the 1970s, as I mentioned during my presentation. And regarding the possible problems of endogeneity in the cost function for that's a topic which is not normally, I think in recent years, there have been some proposals to control for endogeneity in the context of SFA, but this has been something not very well looked upon, because I think it can generate sometimes some problems when from some econometric problems when people try to address that. So normally, well, we include some variables in the efficiency term. In this case, we focus on the introducing variables related to the quality of institutions. But sometimes, for instance, in other papers, we have done things like including the energy prices or things like that, because we were interested in looking at what's the impact of these variables on the inefficiency term. And normally there is no much discussion of if this can generate a problem of endogeneity or exogeneity, endogeneity, because these variables enter in the model through the inefficiency term, so they enter in a nonlinear way. So as I said, there is normally no much discussion about endogeneity, but following your advice and your comments and the reference also you have given to us from DHF Voss and this ideal pricing schemes, I think we will try to discuss this thing and include a paragraph or some discussion in the paper. So many thanks for your comments. They have been very helpful.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Manuel, and thank you, Shim. And now the floor is open. We have another few minutes left. Now it is, Professor Rabindra Nepal.
Yes, so thank you so much, Dr. Onbu. So Dr. Sam and Manuel, thanks a lot for your presentation. So what Young suggested as policy prescriptions were more around the distribution pricing principles, but I think there are regulatory commissions set up in each state in India that looks after distribution pricing. And I think there is a need in the paper to link institutions to the regulatory aspect, and also make a case that in doing so, the lack of using in doing so the uses of the old data is justifiable, and there is no need for new data. So yeah, I think institutions can be better described and a bit elaborated, and so much of the discussions have occurred around the methodological aspects, but we need to enrich the policy content of it, and I think it can be linked to the regulatory framework and principles and so forth. So that's just my observation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nepal. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, here Dr. Gopal is here. Can I have some, not questions, and clarifications?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Loaka, for the nice presentation. It's definitely an interesting study. Just a clarification is that when you use the institutional variables like SDI and all, and how have you apportioned that across discounts? Because these data are largely available at the subnational levels. For instance, let's say state like Karnataka has 5 distribution utilities. So how have you used this data in as far as the utilities are concerned? This is one. Second is that when you look at institutions, one of the important variable probably could be regulatory variables. For instance, regulatory strength, which has been used by, I think, one or two papers, including one of my papers where I try to look at whether regulatory strength is contributing to the efficiency of distribution utilities. So are you thinking of including those kind of variables? So these are two comments on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any other comments, suggestions? Just to wrap up, I do have two observations to make, and Manuel, this paper is good, and you started with the hypothesis that is this discounts are has a problem with the financial sustainability, and then you framed the questions of the factors that includes the structural, economic, and the political governance system and other things, and then finally you end up saying that there is an inefficiency. Probably that is you could further narrow down, and also as suggested by Professor Nepal, and the factor analysis, and see that is what contributed for this institutional inefficiency, and that kind of clarity could be come. I think this model has the potential. And my second observation is to check the data. I think that the data that is you presented in the comparative data, and I think please recheck that. Maybe a kind of, you may get a kind of different background. And third one is on the slide 11, and these three models show some kind of convergence and also the divergence after 2009. So what happened to this during the 2009? And that is a kind of curiosity-driven question. And I stop here. And so you have any response, final response before we wrap up the question, session?
Response from me or from the audience?
Yes,
sorry.
So from you. And
well, you have all of you have said many good comments. So we will try to say a bit more about the policy implications derived from the effect of the institutional quality on the performance of the utilities. But regarding your last point about what happened in 2009, 2010, I'm not really an expert in the Indian context. My co-authors are, but we haven't found any meaningful explanation for this. But maybe someone in the audience here, which know this context much better than me, probably they can help us to to identify if there has been a major change, a major breakpoint at that year. So, but apart from that, just to say thanks and to everyone for all the useful comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think now we have 35, and now we are exceeding the time and taking. I think there is no questions. So if you have still questions, you can pass on to this box, chat box. Without further ado, and I would like to thank all the presenters, Professor Kobal and Professor Manuel, and also the discussions, Mr. Moshin and Professor Shim. Thank you very much for your contributions. Now I would like to give the floor back to Professor Peter Morgan.
Hey, thanks very much, Ambu. We'll now have a break. Since we're about 5 minutes behind schedule, let's reconvene at 3:45. But before that, I would like to take a group picture. So if everybody could turn on their camera, we'll have the picture taken.
Okay, I count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. It's done.
Okay, so we'll reconvene at 3:45 Tokyo time.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you all.
Okay, let's get started. So this is session 2 on private investment in utilities and renewable energy projects. And Farhad is the chair. So Farhad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. So welcome back to the second session. So utilities in many developing countries, especially in Asia, are owning and running by state-owned enterprises. So public utilities are usually more labor intensive and have higher costs and lower efficiencies than private utilities. Therefore, to increase the utilities productivity, it is essential to boost the private investment in this sector, which will also impact the whole economy. The private sector has incentives and will take the necessary step to reduce the cost. The government's role would be to act as a regulator and supervisor of the electricity market and ensure the tariff competitiveness for the consumer's welfare. But due to several risks, large-scale investment, the long-term horizon of the utility investment, and low rate of return, the privatization or the new private investment into new utilities in Asia is moving slowly. Therefore, it is important to discuss ways to unlock private investment. In this section, we will discuss the private investment into utilities and renewable energy projects. And we are going to have 2 papers. So first of all, I would like to invite Dr. Hyung-Suk Shim of CUNY College of Staten Island in the US to present the paper on modeling solar energy system adoption and payment in Myanmar. Dr. Shim, please, mic is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. So everybody see my screen here?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for having me. My name is Shim. I'm an assistant professor at the City University of New York, and I'm really happy to join. But you know, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning here in New York. So please, somebody yell at me if I fall asleep. All right. So the paper I would like to introduce, I'd like to present today is the joint work with Hyun at Yonsei University, Korea, and Taekjihad Hazari at Tokai University, Japan, and myself. And it's about this. So we are trying to empirically characterize who uses solar devices, like solar panels and things like that. And luckily, we got a quite new and interesting data set from World Bank. And what they did is so-called they ran a project called a multi-tier framework global survey, which provide a household and individual level energy access and usage with demographic and economic characteristics. And it looks pretty interesting data set. So we utilize that. And what else? Yeah, we realize that, and we estimate a first probabilistic choice model for solar devices users in Myanmar. And first, we use a binary choice model like logistic or probit, and then we ran a multinomial choice model with the payment option. And the last one is we ran a Heckman's 2-step selection model to estimate the electricity demand, including solar devices used as a selection. Okay? So some households and individuals have a choice to have solar devices in their household, and our goal is to examine whether that household with solar panels, or solar devices have have additional expenditure and energy consumption, which is called a rebound effect. So I'm going to explain in detail. And our empirical analysis result is actually just characterizing who would like to be solar devices users. So I'm going to explain detail when we get to the result slide. Okay. All right. So the data set we use is, as I said, from World Bank. It's a multi-tier framework global survey, and that survey carried out in 17 countries across Latin America, Africa, Asia, including Myanmar. So basically, they went to developing countries, or some countries having struggled with providing or supplying electricity to their citizens and people in that countries. And the survey object, well, so I checked a couple of days ago. The World Bank provided a couple of data out of 17 countries, couple of countries data out of 17 countries. And it has very interesting survey items in the data set. So I'd like to suggest to take a look at their MTF, so-called MTF data set. All right. So why we choose Myanmar out of 17 countries, or couple of countries, which data are available in World Bank, is that Myanmar has become one of Asia's most rapid growing economies, and they had very fast poverty reduction throughout recent decade, and their electrification rate has very rise sharply. So those background would be the factors that caught our eyes, and so we decided to use Myanmar. And practically, Myanmar survey, the MTF survey items are differ by countries. I don't know why World Bank did that, but they didn't ask the same survey questions for every countries. So some countries' data set have no solar devices uses at all. So the surveys over country survey items over countries are not consistent. And I was looking at the data, and Myanmar has the most feasible data set, including all necessary variables or questionnaires. So I suggest to choose Myanmar. Okay. All right. So why solar device? I'd like to introduce a very recent paper by Boomhauer and Davis from AEJ Applied Economics in 2020. And so for me, as an econometrician, I do need a justification for our empirical analysis result being identifiable and statistically consistent. But as I mentioned in my discussion session, there's a serious issue in demand estimation and supply function estimation or production function estimation, that the unobserved price of the goods and services will be correlated with the independent variable that causes statistically inconsistency problem, and it's the parameter that I would like to estimate are not identifiable. But the good thing is here, the renewable energy sources have almost zero marginal cost. So their supply curve are pretty much flat. Second, their supply curve for electricity is perfectly vertical and having near zero marginal cost. and the electricity demand is price inelastic. So these things will be very, it sounds very helpful to me to justify our result are, you know, endogeneity free, endogeneity due to unobserved price free. Okay. So as I said, the data we use is MTF data collected in Myanmar, and there are 3,446 households included in the data set. And our unit, observation unit, is individual. So each household has at least 4 household members who are actively participating in labor forces. So the total size of our data set is about 15,000. But since we have a lot of missing observations for a couple of variables, our model estimation utilizes about less than 5,000 observations. But again, the unit of our analysis is individual. Okay, so first is empirical model that we estimate is a probabilistic choice model. So the baseline is non-solar devices users, okay? And the other alternative are payment options. So I'd like to have solar devices. Then the question is, how do I pay? Do you want to pay full, right, how do I say? Yeah. Do you want to pay in full now, or you want to pay later with interest, separately as an annuity contract or something like that, or having some help from microfinance or some development agency who provide subsidies for that, right? So the good thing of using Myanmar data and solar devices usage in Myanmar data is that we have all these payment options for solar devices who uses solar devices in Myanmar. And we assume, this is just a typical multinomial logic demand model. Okay, and okay. Yeah, so multinomial logic demand model. And we ran a multinomial logic demand estimation, and yeah, and let's take a look at the result. So before we run a multinomial logic demand, we run a discrete choice, binary choice model, which is logistic regression and probability regressions, and as a preliminary kind of model estimation. So as we see, well, the differences, difference in model specification by the column are the combination of fixed effect. So first column and fourth column has no industry fixed effect, and second column and fifth column has no state fixed effect, and the third one and sixth one are having everything, both of fixed effect dummy variables. Okay, and as you see, income is not significant, but home ownership are very strong. Home ownership is very strongly significant for all model specification, and the rural residency dummy is also very significant, and no grid connection is the strongest in terms of size and the sign and the significance. And marital status, is positive. So I would think that this characterizes who are most likely to be solar devices users. Someone has their own home, and someone who lives in a rural area and having no grid access, okay, including marital status. All right, so next one is the result of a multinomial logic choice model. And as you see, the column is separate payment options. So this column estimate the probability choice model for solar devices from non-users to users who bought solar devices fully paid. And this column represents a model estimate who bought solar devices under installment. Like, you know, I don't know what exactly under installment mean by that, but you know, I think it sounds like someone who postponed to make a full payment at the time of their purchase. Okay, and third one is someone who owns solar devices as a rent, and the other one received for free from some energy the government or some charitable organization subsidy. Okay, this has pretty diversified coefficient estimate in terms of sign and significance, right? So the rent, someone who has solar devices using through rent has a very strong and positive income coefficient. And the home ownership is significant for fully paid and the rent. And rural area is significant on fully paid and rent and receive for free. And no grid connection no grid connection is positively significant for all types of payment options. Okay. All right. So the last one I'd like to introduce is our hedonic electricity demand model estimation using Heckman's two-step selection model estimation. And our assumption is this is the Y1 is electricity expenditure or consumption, and X1 is a vector of the covariate or independent variable that explain electricity demand or electricity consumption, and U1 is error term. Well, let me just skip through it. So basically, second one, Y2 is a binary solar device uses the indicator. So we consider this Heckman's selection model with the inverse Mills ratio of selection for solar devices users. So by looking at the gamma parameter gamma 1, we can examine whether there is a rebound effect or not. So what rebound effect in energy efficiency investment literature is that when the government or some organization, international organizations subsidize or help households have less efficient or lack of energy excesses, then their expenditure, their energy consumption will go up above the savings they can make by having the energy efficiency investment. So that is called a rebound effect. But recent literature like Fowley, Greenstone, Wolfram in 2018 at QJE, and Gillingham, Kotzen, and Rapson, and Wagner in Nature 2013 paper pointed out that rebound effect may exist, but it's very small. So, you know, the policy,
Dr. Chim, 1 minute is remaining.
Okay, thank you. The subsidy policy, investment efficient energy investment policy or enhancement policy would be effective that, you know, provide yeah, let's not talk about details. I mean, but rebound effect is the main main discussion in energy efficiency investment. So our two-step estimation can examine also the rebound effect of solar devices usage. So this is expenditure estimation. So I took a couple of important variable might be interesting. So, you know, by looking at this third one, which is a full model, including all fixed effect dummies, have have similar kind of coefficients, but by looking at this selection coefficient on selection part have absolutely no significance. And the most important thing is this inverse parameter estimate of the inverse Mills ratio. If this is positive and significant, that means there's a rebound effect where the household and individual spend too much energy and by having solar devices. Okay, but we don't find it. Oh yeah, and we checked the consumption of the measuring kilowatt and found the same thing. So that is pretty much it. And I'd like to have some questions and to see a good comment for
Thank you very
paper.
much for the presentation. So next I would like to invite Dr. Rabindra Nepal for discussing this paper. Rabindra.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Farhad, and thank you, Dr. Seem, for your interesting presentation. So to those of you who don't know me yet, so my name is Dr. Rabindra Nepal. I'm based at the University of Wollongong in Australia, and I look forward to interacting and meeting all of you one day. So this paper, Modeling Solar Energy System Adoption and Payment in Myanmar, as you just heard from Dr. Seem. So the motivation for this paper comes from the fact that there is a poor understanding of the determinants of solar energy adoption, especially in developing countries, and its role in providing universal electricity access. So it's driven by one of those sustainable development goals, and developing countries do not have the types of electricity grids installed in developed countries, and empirical analysis in the context of developing countries cannot systematically measure the impact of transitioning from a grid-based electricity model to a grid-based or remote solar PV model. I mean, the motivation of this paper is very strong, very timely, very concurrent, right? And so hence, the motivation provides or guides the purpose of this paper, which is to examine the characteristics and the determinants of household adoption of solar energy technology for two groups in Myanmar using the World Bank's multi-tier global survey on energy access. Households with and without access to solar energy. Specifically, this study compares the socio-demographic dwelling and electricity consumption characteristics of these two groups with and without energy access, okay? So moving ahead, now the methodology that the authors perform is a discrete-wise model estimation to empirically characterize solar panel users using the MTF survey for Myanmar. Now you already heard from Dr. Sim around the motivations for choosing Myanmar as a case study and also the motivations behind using this particular estimation strategy. Now, one more novelty that the authors provide to the methodology is based around the creation of a new binary indicator variable for solar device ownership using the solar device type question in the survey. And they perform a multinomial choice model estimation for the payment method for purchasing a solar device. Now, however, as you heard from Dr. Sim around the rebound effects literature and the concepts and its repercussions to this strand of research, so the solar device ownership decision may be endogenous and the ordinary least squares estimate for the ownership effect can therefore be biased. So to address this concern, the authors estimate the electricity expenditure function using the Heckman's two-step selection method. Now, the data you already heard earlier on that is extracted from the World Bank. The MTF survey provides meaningful data for research on energy access in developing countries. And energy access in the survey includes access to electricity, right? So what are the different interesting results that the authors report? So the results from the discrete and multinomial choice models show that married homeowners in rural areas without local or national grid connections are more likely to have solar devices. Married homeowners prefer outright purchase of solar devices. Households and individuals with more income working in non-farm businesses and living in their own houses in rural areas prefer renting solar devices. And last but not the least, women living in rural areas are more likely to obtain solar devices for free. And the further two results are reported from the Heckman selection models. Okay, so solar devices significantly reduce expenditure for electricity. So the income effect is significantly positive for the selection and the expenditure equations. In terms of policy conclusions, the authors recommend that a policy uh, uh, solution for Myanmar or other similar economies would be to introduce community or market-based financing schemes similar to hometown investment trust funds for small and medium-sized solar projects. Okay, so these are the interesting aspects of the paper that the authors have captured. Please forgive this repetition here. It's a typo. Okay. Now, overall, I really found this research to be very impressive, of high quality. Okay, rigorous estimation approaches, the good motivations. All right, and overall. A research worthy to be published with significant policy potentials. However, there are still some loose ends that needs to be tightened, okay, before that. So the abstract, I mean, as you heard earlier on, this particular journal, Economic Analysis and Policy, is built around the policy thrust of the research papers that are accepted for publication. And in the current form, the extract is very shy or silent with regards to the policy potential. Okay, it does not include any such aspects. So please articulate on that. Literature review. I mean, the section needs to clearly mention the gap that the paper is filling in the literature. I mean, solar is, as one of the widely adopted distributed renewable energy resources, is being researched also very widely these days. So what is the contribution of this paper in the overall literature? I mean, I can certainly see that the authors have gone a step ahead with regards to the choice of estimation models and specifications, which is good, but those aspects needs to be clearly detailed out in the literature review section. And one strategy that they might adopt to achieve that purpose would be by summarizing the literature in a table in terms of the authors, the data, the methodology, the main results, and then, claiming their contribution. And last but not the least, when it comes to the conclusions and the policy implications part, yeah, the section the section should touch upon how the findings relate to meeting the SDGs, given the motivation provided in the introduction. So the introduction talks about SDGs in a lengthy manner, but when it comes to the conclusions and policy implications, there is no direct linkage, which we would expect based on the findings of the results. So that is not there at the moment. So please work on that. And also, please also articulate on the international relevance of the research findings and the scope of this research, as this research has significant potential in helping to achieve the SDGs of several other emerging and developing economies around the world. So thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rabindra, for your comments, precious comments on this paper. So, Dr. Shim, would you please answer, or do you want to answer?
Oh yeah, first of all, thank you so much for your thorough review and and suggestions. I've spoken with Hyun, the other co-author, that we quite acknowledge it, the lack of policy suggestions and literature review, but we kind of didn't thought about the discussion on SDG and how the solar devices usage can help to achieve SDG. And it would be very interesting and suggestion. And I really appreciate your suggestions. And we will definitely work on, especially, I should apologize. My slide has been updated like last night too. So, we have no chance to update our main papers and the slide, but we probably need to put mentioned what I find the recent literature on rebound effect and those kind of things. That will be interesting. So again, I really appreciate your comment. And I got a question from the audience, Ashim Saha. Can I answer
yes,
this?
please.
Yeah. So the question said, what types of sustainable alternative energy may be used for LMIC or underdeveloped country? Sorry. What is LMIC? I never heard that.
Low and middle income countries.
Okay. I'm sorry. Well, I would say I'm not sure whether there is very clear definition of sustainable alternative energy, but in my opinion, the alternative energy would be renewable, like wind, and solar, and water, things like that. Whereas the energy sources that we try to, as a human being, try to replace would be nuclear energy and coal that causes a lot of external negative externalities. So that is my short answer. So is that enough for you, Ashim?
Yes, I think enough.
Okay.
And so Ravindra, let me also add, since I'm also the co-author of this paper. So thank you for the comment that I think it will improve the paper if we connect it to the SDGs, especially, I mean, the related SDGs, SDG 7, which is completely related. I mean, our study is completely related to it, clean and affordable energy. And especially, I think this SDG is more relevant for, I mean, such kind of policies for increasing the access to electricity through solar energy can increase the affordability and accessibility of energy and also availability of energy. So it means at the same time that the energy security is enhancing, at the same time it can help to achieve the SDGs, especially SDG 7, which is talking about affordable and clean energy. So we will add to it, and I will add these parts to the paper and connect it to the SDG. That would be more interesting for the reader since it is a hot topic. Okay, thank you very much. So we have 2 minutes left in this for this paper. Is there any other comments, question, or points by the panelists or the participants?
Intervene and
yes,
you have time.
Dr. Ambu, yes, please.
No, I think we did a survey in Myanmar, and we find this diesel generators are replaced by the solar and the storage system, and so that it produces some kind of new consumers and as well as the producers. And from your observation and from your survey, there is a World Bank data survey, and what does it mean to these utilities? Still, Myanmar, it is 70% of people doesn't have the access to this energy. So this emergence of new, basically technological disruptions happening at the decentralized level. What does it mean to these utilities? There's a grid that have been already operated by this Myanmar government, basically military.
Got it. So it's a very interesting question. So basically, so maybe our finding would help to design the most efficient subsidy policy or energy investment policy. So who would be the most demanding household and individuals, for the alternative energy source like solar devices? And if the government or some international organization support or subsidize the solar devices uses for that desperate household and individuals, how much productivity improvement can be made so that the Myanmar's overall economy will grow with respect to that energy subsidizing policy. So that's our probable or feasible goal, or how they say, or contributions to the policymakers. Does it make sense?
Let me also add let me complete the answer. So in the utilities business, I mean, the business models are also changing. So the centralized utilities, which is the common and the conventional, so might not be a suitable solution for less developed countries, since it requires a high upfront cost, high capex and investment and so on. So the decentralized and also off-grid solutions, such as using the solar rooftop systems, using the survey that we have done, and that we use the data of it for Myanmar. So it is a solution for these countries. So the result of this research, as mentioned by Dr. Shim, can help the governments in Myanmar and other developing countries to have right policies for supporting the households, for increasing their accessibility to such kinds of renewable electricity. I hope we could answer to your.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there a time for one more question?
I think we ran out of time, but if it is, if you
want. So one thing, so there are some countries, that are also allowing for on-grid solar solutions, right? So, and also happening in Asia. So when it comes to that, I think the next issue would be around the appropriate incentive mechanism for that, and feed-in tariffs and the appropriate charges could be another financing aspects that needs to be looked into. And I think, the paper can also comment on these aspects rather than advocating solar as a complete off-grid energy solution, So with progress in system integration and with learning involved, I think solar will be a dominant on-grid solution. So thank you.
So both the hybrid.
Hybrid,
Also off-grid is mainly for the remote area. Having that grid infrastructure required high cost. However, when the grid is available, definitely it can be connected to the national power grid. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Shim and Dr. Rabindra, Dr. Ambu, and other participants for their questions. So next, let's move to the next paper. Next paper is on unlocking private investment in electric utility through post-reform agenda. So by Dr. Mohsen from Jiangsu University of China. So Dr. Mohsen, please. So your mic is mute. Please unmute your mic. Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay now.
Okay, thank you so much. So let me share my screen. Okay, so you can see my screen?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, let's start. My topic is unlocking private investment in the electric utility through post-reform agenda. So the revisited energy efficiency through the power sector reform. So first of all, I would like to explain the main content of the paper, what we have done actually in this paper. So nowadays, as the renewable energy is the widely adopted source of energy. Okay, so renewable energy is the widely adopted source of energy, but the main issue is that we have problem of capital. So it's mean we don't have enough capital to target the 100% renewable energy. So now we need to unlock private investment in the electric utility. So how it would be possible? So actually, we have measured the energy efficiency before electricity reforms and then energy efficiency after electricity reforms. So the first content will explain what was the difference between uh, before electricity reform and after electricity reform by the mediating role of environment. So currently we cannot ignore the environment as a major and mediating role in the field of energy, economics, and environment. Actually, the World Bank, along with other major financial institutions, started the backing power sector transformation in emerging economies while decreasing the interest of politicians over energy supply insurance. So the World Bank feels that the politicians and the governments maybe some other reasons causing the lack of investment in renewable energy. So in the case of any power sector, there are various aspects like policy formulation, governing, and the utility provision activities to complete. For example, 72% of the developing economies hold a governing body up to 2015, resulting in this being the most applied and the most common of the four main policy advice of the Washington Consensus. And then reforms such as the increased capacity generation, transmission, distribution losses, and the respective regions or reform variables such as the entry of the independent power producers, the unbundling of the generation and transmission, and the establishment of regulatory agencies, and the emergence of the wholesale spot market. So now, so by evaluating and assessing the impact of these power sector reform on the efficiency, so then we can take any decisions about call for the private investment in these utilities. So thus the policy formulating includes covering the strategic course for the sector, and the governance includes the inspecting the sectors to guarantee that the strategic path is being pursued and implemented, which provides services including the actual application of the strategic path. So by formulating, implementing of these power sector reforms can attract the investment only in the case we can feel any betterment. Betterment means we can feel any improvement in the energy efficiency before electricity reforms and after electricity reforms. So this study attempts to investigate the role of power sector reform with the effective management system of energy efficiency, improvement, and the intensity reduction. So this study also provides a way forward for the developing Asia, which is suffering from increasing energy efficiency to reduce the production cost. So how it will be like that? So we will do this by adopting the learn from other models being adopted in the region. For example, any country in the developing countries, one country can be considered as the best country. So we are considering that country as a role model. So we will follow that country in the set of developing region. It is one of the primary experimental studies of its kind entailing the power sector reform to improve the energy efficiency for long-term economic development. So now we have another one variable added in this. So first was the electricity reforms, energy efficiency, and then assessment of energy efficiency after electricity reforms by mediating role of environment and economic development. So it seems like a multi-objective goal programming type of case where we need to attract the private investment in electric utility sector. Okay, so we can see a huge literature in this field. So let me briefly go through these slides. So Kimani in 2002 deemed that the reforms in the power sector are critical drivers of economic growth, and these reforms can help to improve the generation capacity and financial performance of some utilities. So for financial performance is also important in context of electric utility. For example, we have 500 billion PKR rupee circular debt in our economy due to the electricity sector. So definitely we don't have enough resources to produce renewable. So we buy oil and then we generate the electricity from that oil, and we don't have sufficient funds to buy the oil. So definitely we need to the circular debt. So this is also important concept, indicator, important parameter in this issue. And then Ahmad and Bhatt in 2019 indicated that the contradictory conduct of the various regulatory reform against different countries and regions of the world should consider the formulation of power sector policy. And in 2016, Burgess et al. Attempt to investigate the power sector reforms in the advanced country data set. And after that, Paldo 2010 perceived that developing countries to achieve in the power sector economic and consumer utility reform. So huge set of literature can be found on the power sector reforms. And then let me go through this. Okay, so regarding the methodology, we have used two types of methodology. One, we have used the instrumental variable strategy to identification and specify the linear equation. And then we have used the data envelopment analysis. So actually in this paper, first we have measured that what is the impact of reforms on the improvement and the betterment of the electricity in the electric utility sector. And then second, we have used the data envelopment analysis. So data envelopment analysis by using the mediating role of economic and environment. So in this paper, we have used two methods. First is the econometric estimation. Second, actually a very interesting information as per my understanding. So econometric, the regression performance of regression will indicate the evidences from the econometric estimation, and then is the data envelopment analysis. So data envelopment analysis will provide some empirical evidences from the operation research. So we have two types of modeling sides. One is the econometric, second is operation research. So from the econometrics, we have used and take the support from the regression. And from the operation research, we have asked to support from the data envelopment analysis. So now the important point is that we have used GDP and CO2 as an output. Definitely, when we performed any activity in our economy, we have desirable and undesirable output, even we want or not, but still we have CO2 emission. So now the issue is that we need to address this CO2 issue. Of course, we need to maximize the GDP. Our target and our objective function is to maximize and increase the GDP by increasing the energy efficiency through electricity reforms. But still we cannot ignore the CO2. That's what we need to identify in this case. So let me conclude once again by the methodology. We have used two types of modeling methodology. One is from the econometric estimation, second from the operation research. From the econometric estimation, we have used a regression equation. From the econometric, from the operation research, we have DEA methodology. By mediating role of energy and economics and environment. Okay, so The empirical investigation, so the empirical investigation suggested that the effective managerial reform is the more important than just announcing reforms. For example, in the UK, Denmark, Belgium, and Finland have 0.88, 6.2, and so on, the efficiency score respectively in 2010, while lost their efficiency score 0.4, 0.2, and 0.24 in 2014, and found themselves at 813 on the overall ranking. Okay, so further the results suggest that the giving permission to new private-owned business and privatization the existing publicly owned businesses. So definitely we need to enhance energy efficiency by reforming the electric utility. So how we can reform? Our reforms can invite the private investment to unlock the investment in the electric utility. That's what we need to define a very clear agenda for the general public to call for the public investment. Then is the regulation setting up the high performance, efficient, and the autonomous regulatory businesses. So it can be achieved by providing the third-party network access. So incentivizing the transmission and distribution network is also deemed a compulsory. So we need to maximize the energy efficiency by using the set of reforms. So now the issue is that how we can strengthen these reforms to ensure the investor trust, so that they can participate in the electric utility investment. Then is the restructuring, the horizontal division of production and supply, while the vertical unbundling of generation, transmission, distribution, and supply activities. So let me explain something related to the reforms and the energy efficiency. So before electricity reform, we were this energy efficiency score. So before and after electricity reforms, the comparison between the before and after electricity reforms in terms of energy efficiency will help to formulate a policy structure to call the private investment. Okay, so this table and this is another table. So this table explains the energy efficiency before reforms and this after reform. So we can conclude that maybe we didn't put this information. So by the way, we can see that after electricity reforms, energy efficiency can be increased by 13%. So 13% is the differences form of the efficiency before and after electricity reforms. So it means that by adding some specific set of electricity reforms, we have improved and increased our energy efficiency by 13% in the region. Okay, so now let me conclude the main findings. The role of energy supply is also significant for energy efficiency. For the case of underlying countries, the import-dependent country has much better reforming policies. And then the source of energy supply itself had enormous impact on energy efficiency, enhancement, and intensity reduction. For example, if we examine the source of energy supply, it's rushing towards the renewable energy. So the developing Asia requires this kind of energy transaction towards renewable energy, as this will not be helpful for the energy efficiency and intensity. Actually, these findings are crucial for those countries which are taking reforms initiatives to maintain their sustainable economic progress with a better environmental condition. And then the application and usage of comprehensive reform support it inevitable blood difference.
Yeah, would you please finish it soon?
And then okay, so let me conclude it very briefly. So okay, the current interlinking capabilities are not enough to decrease the impact of focus on the domestic market, and then developing economies left with a significant investment and the environment related problem which need to resolution in the case of capacities to be enhanced. And then to the safe and secure electricity supply need to be focused on the domestic level, since it presents the ordinary resource and it risk being used. And these all the policy implication. And thank you. That's what I have tried to present in a brief way. And you are welcome to your suggestion and questions.
Thank you very much for presenting this paper. It was very interesting. So let me invite the discussant of this paper. So Dr. Saqib bin Amin from North South University in Bangladesh will kindly discuss this paper. Dr. Saqib.
Can you hear me, Farad?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mohsen, can you please allow me to share my screen?
Yes, sure, you can.
I think you need to stop sharing.
Yes, please stop the sharing, then push the share screen button.
Okay, sir, I'm trying.
On the top.
Yeah, I think it's not necessary. I think if you share your screen, you'll automatically.
I don't know what to do. I'm trying. By the way, I'm trying.
So I can share because there is a message like this will stop. Okay, I can do that. Let me just try. Does it work?
Yes, it's
okay. Excellent. So sorry for this inconvenience. So first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Mohsen, for a nice presentation. And it is my absolute pleasure to be the discussant of this paper. And I'd like to thank ADBI for inviting me as the discussant. So this paper actually deals with a very important issue, as we all know that the policymakers in different countries, especially the developing countries, have focused on the electricity sector reform to achieve higher efficiency. In fact, for the last 4 decades, the reform initiatives started in the 80s, okay, which is limited to a very few countries, for example, Chile, UK, Norway. But in the 1990s, it was widespread, reform initiatives, which can be observed in the lot of Asian countries as well as other developing countries. But the problem is that most of the developing countries face a range of challenges in their electricity sectors because it's not like the developed countries. It's most of the developing countries, the energy sector is entirely or mostly controlled by the government. Okay, so moreover, there is very little competition, low rate of electrification, low per capita electricity consumption, the prevalence of high energy subsidies, the absence of cost reflective pricing, along with the high technical and non-technical energy losses in the transmission and distribution networks. Also the vertically integrated setup actually very, regular phenomenon in the energy sector in the developing country. Therefore, the electricity reform policies are crucial for the Asian developing countries to grow and for the better livelihoods of the Asian people. So given this background, I think Dr. Mohsen has rightly pointed out the ensuring energy efficiency in the sector through the reform instruments may lead to achieve energy security and future economic stability. He has argued in this paper that the role of energy supply and the sources of energy supply itself have an enormous impact on energy efficiency enhancement and also the intensity reduction. He finds that the import-dependent country has much better reforming policies and follow-up management system compared to the other countries. This finding seems to striking to me in a sense that many countries in Asia actually depends on the imported sources of energy, and they actually pay high import bills. If you have a quick look of the literature, you can find that, like, because of this price shock in the international market, they are exposing the economy to those countries who actually import energy more vulnerable. The author also reveals that, like, the transition towards the renewable clean source of energy may increase the energy efficiency along with the other economic benefits. So the findings or the outcomes of this paper are definitely, are useful for the policymakers of the developing countries to prepare a future roadmap for the energy policy. So as mentioned, like, it's a good paper for the developing countries perspective. Now I like to focus on a few points for the rooms for improvement. So throughout the actual manuscript, also in the slide, I have found probably a few typos, because, like, is it DA or DAE? So there is a mix of these two words. So I think it's a typo. So it's better to overcome these typos. The second thing I would like to highlight, that a clear explanation is needed. Okay, the selection of the variables. Explanation can be given for the selection of variables in the model. From my understanding, the study considers human capital and energy consumption as input of the variables. Perhaps the author might discuss, like, how actually, how he can justify the inclusion of these two variables, how the selection, inclusion of human capital and energy consumption can, like, reflect the concept of the energy efficiency in line with the title of the paper. Okay, now maybe if there is a scope, he can also think considering a few other variables, okay, for a better insight of the energy measurement. Then I also think that the many readers may not be familiar about this methodology. As the author has mentioned, he adopted two different types of techniques, econometric techniques and the operational methods. So it's better, like, if you can give some realistic, importance of DEA method in relation to the energy sector. Yes, I understand you explained the mathematical formulation, derivation of this methodology very well. However, I think it could improve the readability if a brief discussion or a citation regarding the significance and the relevance of the methodology can be in relation to the energy sector can be included. And regarding the mathematical derivation, rather than make the paper too lengthy, I think you can consider adding a technical appendix, okay, which I think it's a good idea. Then the most important thing I would like to actually stress, I found a similar paper by Liu and Liu, 2018, titled Evaluating the Energy Efficiency of European Union Countries, the Dynamic Data Envelopment Analysis. I'm happy to share that paper. So actually, they're also using the same methodology. They're focusing on the environmental side. So I strongly believe that I checked the literature review carefully. So this citation was missing. So it is extremely important the author should add the citation of this paper and a few lines, like, to clarify the issue of the methodological similarity between this paper. Okay, that will give a clear idea about the novelty issue. And surprisingly, Liu and Liu also considers 28 European countries to evaluate the intertemporal efficiency and executive efficiency based on the fossil fuel emissions in the European Union. So as mentioned earlier, that study includes the real capital stock, labor force as the inputs. So why not, you can also try with adding those inputs. And once again, please add a proper justification for selecting the variables. The final thing, like, stylized facts regarding the or maybe comparative analysis before the after effects of the reforms, okay, reflecting the socio-economic indicators, okay, will further, give a better idea about the to the readers, so that they can clearly compare. Before reforms, we had these indicators, and after reforms, can see that improvements. Okay, that could also a nice idea. So the final few things, Farad, I will not take more than 2 minutes to wrap up. I think I still have time. So, based on my comments are actually based on the paper. So introduction, I think section needs to be updated, because I found a bit difficulty to find the consistency, whatever is written in the introduction, in line with the title. So it is better if you can rearrange the introduction, okay, in line with the main research question. At the end of the introduction, it is recommended to add a section about the organization of that entire manuscript. So in the paper, like, you have used different tables and figures. However, the sources are not mentioned. I prefer, like, I think you should also include the sources, okay, in the tables and the figures. At the end of the paper, please also mention about the limitations and the future scope of the recent study. And finally, like, perhaps you were talking about the reform FL instruments and the efficiency out of the reform initiatives. But for some reasons in the operational research methodology, it might be my limitations, but I was looking forward for finding a very robust analysis about the reform instruments being considered in this paper, and also how actually we highlight the efficiency issues. So if you can perhaps add a few lines on this, then I believe it could significantly improve the quality of this paper. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Dr. Saqib. So before I ask Dr. Mohsen if you would like to answer. So it's very good that these, during these workshops, these details, comments and review reports are providing by the discussants. And another good thing is that these slides are available. The discussion, these slides are also available online. And so now that the papers are in the review process, some of them already received the peer review results. So these comments could be added to the peer review reports in order to improve the papers further. So I would like to ask all the authors and contributors to the special issue to consider both comments, the comments that they are receiving from the journals and also the discussion reports of the discussants. So Dr. Mohsen, so do you want to respond to the comments?
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Saqib, for your precious comments. So let me now briefly, I should explain. So whatever the points suggested by Dr. Saqib. So first is the price shock. So actually our main concern is to unlock the private investment in the electricity sector. So I think the effect of price can be evaluated on the production, electricity production, or maybe the electricity efficiency. So for sure, this is a very important point. So we will try to add the price shock, how it can affect the electricity efficiency and overall impact. The second is the DEA or the DA. Very sorry for the typos and the errors. Actually, it's the DEA, data envelopment analysis. For sure, we will address all these issues. And then Dr. Saqib addressed important point, which is the inputs, input selection. Actually, as for our concern regarding the input selection, we have tried to cover the population which is which is consuming, which is using the electricity as an end user. So we have used the population as a human capital as inputs, and then GDP and CO2 as output. Yes, of course, we will review. I will suggest and consult with my co-authors. And second is the two techniques. As I already explained that in the first, in the econometrics techniques, we have tried to investigate the impact of reforms, and the second, in the operation research techniques, DEA, we have tried to measure the energy efficiency. And then as the realistic importance, yes, of course, it is very precious comments. We will try to address the realistic importance in the introduction, especially in the motivation and the contribution paragraphs. And then appendix, yes, of course. The second is the important paper suggested by Dr. Saqib is Lu and Lu 2018. Okay, so let me tell you something about the DEA. So up to now, so far, I think 1800 model have been being used in the DEA, but the basic theme and the basic notation of the DEA are similar in the mathematics. So, for example, so y or x, it means output or inputs can be summed in the form of mathematics in DEA. So of course, yes, you are right. We should be careful to present the novelty of the model. And then thank you so much again for highlighting the organization of the paper. Of course, we will address this issue and then data set and as well. One important issue is the robustness analysis. So, as per my understanding, after your precious comments, so I think the data environment analysis can be used as a robustness analysis after the shock, 10 to 15% shock in the original data set. I mean, we have the original data set, and then we need to shock in the data plus minus 15%, and then we analyze about the results. So either it is robust or not. Of course, for sure, we will do, and I will consult my co-authors. So again, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Saqib, for your valuable comments to improve the paper. And that's what I have the explanation.
Thank you very much for a nice presentation.
Very much, Dr. Mohsen and Dr. Saqib.
Thank you for that.
So we have 2 minutes left in this session and also in today's session. If there is any question, comments by the panelists, participants. Yes, Dr. Ravindra.
Yes, Dr. Mohsen, thank you very much for your enthusiastic and insightful presentation, and also Saqib for your very good overview of the paper and some comments for improvement. So that's great. Now I have one comment. So you rightly pointed that, you know, the World Bank, you showed the World Bank reform template of the 1990s that caught the attention of the developing economies and was adopted, you know, as a wildfire and something like that. So it was widely adopted, and you mentioned, you stress on the lack of those reforms in addressing the environmental objectives that we are facing today, right? The environmental, and to some extent, you can expect so, because if you look at those reform templates, there are no any reform distinct reform steps that are directly linked towards achieving environmental improvements. Okay, so based on that, you can expect it. But on the other hand, now there is a need to rethink on that reform template and provide some acute policy steps and prescriptions around how you can reform the existing reform menu, right, to achieve these environmental objectives, given the different decarbonization targets and different environmental commitments in place. You know, so I think what is important from your research for us to know is what are those acute steps. You know, what what would that reformed reform reform template look like, based on the findings of your study. So we are very much keen to reading that from your research paper. So I hope this will also help in articulating the policy implications of your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
So,
much, Professor.
thank you very much, Dr. Ravindra. Dr. Ambu, do you want to add or comment? Your mic is mute.
So what is the objective of the paper? And the title says unlocking the private finance and then are improving the efficiency. But really, then your model, this two model DAE NSP model has the inputs, the human capital, GDP, CO2, and but to be frank, or it is not frank, irrespective of a developing country or the developed country, there are three factors that is needed to improve the efficiency. That is coming out from our studies. The first one is the cost recovery, and with the predictable, transparent with the tariff structure. That is a criteria, the first criteria. And the second thing is each entity should have a kind of corporate strategy for improving the financial efficiency. Third one is what we found in this region, the ASEAN plus region, is the changing role for the government. And I'm wondering, and from that perspective, whether these three factors could be captured by your model, and whether in the form of input or the output parameters, then you have a more storyline to tell, as Professor Nepal pointed out, more direct, relevant policy recommendations. That is how the countries can move forward. Just an observation, and you don't need to react to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there is no more question, Dr. Mohsen, do you want to add something?
It's okay, sir. Thank you so much for the precious comments.
Okay, thank you very much. So with this, I would like to wrap up this session, and I would like to thank to all the speakers and discussants and all panelists and participants for their comments and the questions. So Peter, please.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd like also to thank all of the presenters and the discussants. It's been very useful presentations and lots of good suggestions. So let's carry on with this tomorrow. And so I look forward to seeing you all at 2 p.m. Tokyo time tomorrow. So please have a good day in the meantime. And for those who are very late at night, have a good rest. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Tomorrow. See you all.
Bye.
See ya.
Okay. See you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.